Hello, how do humans, and welcome to the Rediscover Human podcast with me, Timothy Sheaf, and Josh Gape. Today is episode 14. I got it wrong last week, but we're back on the right number. It's episode 14. And we've not got a set subject. I guess there's some things we want to go into. Spiral dynamics is something that I find fascinating that I think we're going to cover. Mm-hmm. But just stay on topic with the last few weeks because it feels so relevant right now.
Yeah.
And we've both been diving deep into this stuff. I definitely was like committed to conspiracy fasting for a long time, and just recently it's gone beyond when it merges with the mainstream, what's going on in the mainstream with the Epstein stuff and that Prince Andrew, Clinton, and all of the stuff that's going on, coronavirus. We're forced to address it. It's like I can't just get on with my life and ignore this stuff anymore. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And it feels like we've been drawn into it, so why not? We've kind of both dived head first since, in the matter of a month since coming across, like going into Epstein.
Dived deep over the last month.
Yeah.
I think where my head was with it, I didn't want to look into it, or I sort of knew surface level stuff. But then every time I'd start, putting my head into the rabbit hole, I'd just get like lost and I'd lose sight of, my personal practices, trying to grow the business, you can get so lost in the sort of conspiracy stuff. And I was like, right, I need to take a step back. And you get in fear
as well, right? You can like go to bed with dark thoughts, like worried about stuff. And
100%, man, 100%. Because you can get so caught up in it, and like when you realize that the system isn't as it says it is, and what we're being told in the mainstream, in a huge number of cases, isn't what's going on, then it's a scary thought. It is a scary thought, and I think this is where a lot of people are with it. It
takes bravery to look at this stuff and start to accept that it could be a possibility.
Yeah,
I think so.
Because it just shatters your paradigm.
Yeah, completely.
But then I've come out the other side of that now, where I'm thinking we need to talk about it, need to raise awareness around the topic. And what's been so positive is getting a lot of feedback from last week, where people have been messaging me saying, I hadn't considered this stuff before. Now I'm looking into it. So it's great to see that people have got an open mind around the subject areas.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like positive debate where people are coming in and going, right, I don't necessarily agree with this angle, but I've opened my mind here and I'm willing to do some reading around the subject, within this area. And I think that's all it is like just starting to help people open their mind slightly.
Yeah, to what draws them in, because at different times in your life you'll be drawn to different things. Mm-hmm. And that could be nutrition at this point. For some people, I think we've kind of delved far into that one, and for us it now actually the whole Epstein thing, and then the pedophiles in power, basically.
That's kind of the leading edge for me, is because like, what do I personally know most about? And it's nutrition. And then I look at what the media, what the government, what organizations like the World Health Organization are putting out in terms of their health awareness around everything that's going on in the world at the moment. And the fact of the matter is, they're not covering the importance of holistic health and raising immunity. Yeah. They're just talking about wear a mask, wash your hands, socially distance. And so dumb. Well, there's just the biggest piece of the puzzle is just not being talked about, and then it makes you think, like, why aren't they talking about it? Do they not understand health, or is it more sinister than that, and they're purposely not talking about it? And then you can talk about,
good point.
These media organizations, who are they funded by? Who are these politicians funded by? That's a huge rabbit hole to go into. But then I'm looking at that with my knowledge in nutrition and go, right, okay, what the mainstream is saying isn't correct. And then that shakes your foundation elsewhere. You go, right, if they're lying to us about this, what else are they lying to us about? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah, what else are they lying to us about? And that stuff is really coming to the surface. It's really coming to the surface now. But what within all of it, I think I have to keep reminding myself, like, this black and white checkered floor, like there's God inside, but the devil is inside. So as hard as it is, you always have to reflect that, well, maybe they're not human, but they're human, right? Say they're human, as we're going to be given, right? They're human. That the same ilk that's inside them to make them do it is inside us. Like, the devil's inside us, and it's like, what if all of this stuff that is going on around us, everything as within, so without, right? So, and everything outside is inside. So this is all going on. This is all getting stirred up outside, as we're all we're all kind of healing, and we're all doing our own individual work, and we're all kind of returning to, you know, an ancestral way of living and respect into the land. And we're focused on healing ourselves. And then equally timed to that, parallel is all this stuff getting unearthed in the mainstream. So it's kind of like, as we're working on ourselves and asking for healing, and we're drawing on the healing, and it's always uncomfortable when you're healing. It's not a process of just pure joy and everything gets better and better. It's a process of bringing the dark to the light. So the dark is coming to the light in the external world and what's in the media and everything as well. So it's kind of like, you can get focused on it, but at the same time, don't take it too seriously, because it is just it's part and parcel of the healing work that's going on inside, is that this stuff has to come on the outside. You know, that's what it feels like anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like, when you look at it, you look at this huge world and all the systems that are in place and all the powerful people making moves in, you know, either directions, whether it's good or for bad, and you feel a bit helpless in it all.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what can you do? You can work on yourself.
Yeah.
And by working on yourself and trying to make the world a better place on an individual level, day after day, then you're going to affect the people around you, and it's going to be like a drop in the pond. It's going to have a ripple effect, and the more people that start doing that, it's going to proliferate out into the world. And it's like Paul Chek always says, for example, with food, really basic example, you vote with your pound. So if people weren't buying factory farm meat, then factory farming wouldn't exist.
Completely.
So it's just like making those little changes, right? Okay, I'm going to buy grass-fed, locally sourced, organic meat. And then the more people that start doing stuff like that, you know, the less factory farming there's going to be, the more local, smaller farms are going to start to emerge, where they're using good agricultural practices, where they're looking after the soil, and it starts growing, it starts snowballing.
Steps towards sovereignty. That's what we all need. So let's go into what we kind of briefly talked about as, like, let's make this like kind of the theme for the episode, and that is spiral dynamics. It's something that came to me. A guy I follow on YouTube, he's a breatharian, Ray Maor, was the first person that brought it up that I'd seen, and he talks about it, and it was I was like, oh, this is deep. And he said, I'm going to do more videos, and I couldn't wait for more videos, so I went and dug into it a bit more. And the only other person that had done content on it was Leo Gura, I think his name is, of Actualised.org, who's someone I've kind of like I've seen him come up from like people who watch kind of spiritual content, bring him up, and like Infinite Waters and them ones. And these guys I've never really connected with. I've always sensed something a bit different from them that I've not kind of been connected to. Anyway, his content on spiral dynamics, because he's not created it, he was just sharing, you know, he may have read the book and done his own research, and then he shared what spiral dynamics was in his way. I found it very interesting, and he's done 2-hour videos kind of on each color. And I'll kind of shall I just set up what spiral dynamics
go for it.
So spiral dynamics is kind of a way of seeing the rise of the human mind, the human spirit. You can recognize it in patterns within social groups as well. And it's funny, because years ago I said a quote, truth spirals, and it's something I recognized. And it's kind of the way I was, you know, I went into veganism as kind of a conscious food choice. And then I came back, to eating meat again, and people said, you went back to eating meat. And in my head I was always like, it doesn't feel like I went back to it. It felt like I went forward. It was like an evolution. It wasn't a step. It felt like and people can have their own perspectives, but it felt like another rise in consciousness and understanding of my choices. So spiral dynamics is on that kind of vein, where you're spiraling up in consciousness, and you might go back to something that once you grew out of, and you grow forwards back to an old habit, or not habit, but with more awareness, because you're spiraling. So you're going from one side to the other, and you kind of spiral in each chapter of the dynamics of, you go from one color to another, and you go from internally focused to externally focused, back to internally focused, and then forward to externally focused again. And it kind of, spiral dynamics starts in kind of tribe culture, and I think this is kind of a maroon color, and it's just very tribal, animalistic, living day to day. And I didn't dig too much deep into that, which is purple. I think you've got that written down there, right?
Yes.
Beige, purple. Maybe you can go into, because you've you've dug into it more recently. You might have some things to offer from where it starts. So essentially, spiral dynamics is a color-coded way of recognizing our spiritual evolution and how we grow.
Yeah, it's like a psychic evolution model.
Yeah.
And like just touching on that point that you made, so I watched the Actualised video. I haven't gone into haven't gone into detail in the different stages, but I watched the overarching video. And just like you said, so he covers stages 1 to 7. And like you said, each stage changes color as you go up. And it's sort of this model where it spirals upwards and people progress through their levels of like psychic awareness.
And
basically.
consciousness always kind of grows. You can't go backwards in consciousness.
And that was the point I was going to make, is he says once people go up a level, then you may take stuff from the previous level with you, but it's like no one seems to regress. And they've done a lot of studies on this. Okay. And he gives a really good example of, they did a long-term study with a group of women, I can't remember how many, and they asked them what their opinion was on abortion. Should abortion be allowed? And the answers went yes, no, yes. And when they dug into it, the reason behind it,
as each one had gone from different perspectives.
So they did it at one point in time.
Oh yeah.
So there was just some people said yes, some people said no, and then some people said sort of a different version of the yes. Yeah. And then they revisited all the women like later years again. So the first was yes, just sort of because I say so.
Yeah.
And then the second one was no, because, my religion doesn't allow it, or because it's not.
The same group of women that said yes before, then said no.
So say one group of women, some said yes, some said no, some said yes in certain circumstances. Okay, and then 5 years later, or whatever time later, they revisited the same group of women. And what they noticed was some of the initial yeses had progressed to a no, or even the third yes. Some of the no's had progressed to the final yes. Yeah. And then they did it again later, and it showed the same pattern where some of these women had sort of evolved in their thinking, but no one had regressed to a previous stage. Yeah. And he said they've done plenty of studies where they've looked at this sort of thing, and it's always the same pattern. People tend to evolve in their sort of psychic development, but don't regress. But you do take parts of the previous stages with you.
And you may revisit that truth with new awareness at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just want to caveat before we go into this whole thing and say, this isn't like something to like hang your hat on and live your life around, but at the same time, it's kind of a weather report. It's kind of nice to know what way the wind's going to blow tomorrow, and just to kind of like give yourself a bit of direction, or even it worked for me in terms of like encouragement with where I want to be in life, or what I kind of need to do to help me get to the next stage. And it just highlighted some things. So I found it very useful, but it's just not something to go, this is the be all end all. It's just a recognition of patterns in human development, really is.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really cool model. As with really everything, cool. There's always going to be flaws and different bits and pieces. But if you can recognize where you are in terms of these stages, you go, okay, I really identify with that. Then you can go, okay, what's the next stage? Yeah. And I think a really important message for a lot of people is, they may look at this and think their thought process is sort of the most evolved, they're top of the pile.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you read this and you go, and just like how I did, I thought, okay, actually, there's room for my sort of psychic evolution here. Yeah. And I think that obviously, depending on where you are, the sort of lower down the levels you are, that's probably a tougher pill to swallow. And then as you raise up, you get a greater awareness, and you probably get to the point where you go, yeah, actually, to be fair, my opinion has probably got room to evolve, and you become more at peace with that. Yeah. So, shall I just dive into it?
Yeah, because you seem to have notes on beige and purple and where we all kind of came from at some point, right?
Yeah. Okay. So what I'll do is what I think would be a good idea is we just run through the stages, and then if I sort of touch on anything where you go, I can relate to that, just dive in and sort of we'll give like our personal examples.
Cool. And if you guys image search spiral dynamics, you'll get like a graphic that will just help you to see it a bit clearer.
Yeah. So the first stage is beige, and that's just basic survival. So you're just worried about, where's my next meal coming from, water, safety, security. And this is like when we're infants, your babies, you're pretty, you're not able to look after yourself. You're just surviving day to day. And then an interesting point actually before we get into it is that there's always a buffer bit between each stage.
Yeah, it's an overlap.
There's like an overlap, and there's also like almost like a challenge where you go, okay, I can't actually continue living this way because of, you see the flaw in the stage you're in.
Yeah.
And then you go, right, okay, I need to evolve. But obviously evolution, change is hard. And also it comes with like losses, and, you may lose part of your life that was involved with the previous stage. So from beige, obviously you grow up, and this is the most natural one, because you turn from being, a baby into a small child, into an old child, into an adult. And you realize, okay, I can't just be worried about my own personal survival and where food's coming from. There's other people in the world, and I need to interact with these other people. Yeah. So then that leads you into the next stage, which is purple, which is all like tribal. And if you think this is where we were as sort of humankind like 50,000 years ago, and if you look at, there's still tribes in the Amazon and stuff like that, and this is where they're at. And it's like, so again, you've gone from I, like you said, the baby's just worried about surviving. Now you go into we, where you're like worried about the tribe.
I found this interesting, by the way, purple, because in my head straight away I was like, aren't they more advanced? Because we're talking about getting back to ancestral living. These guys are living ancestrally. But I think this is the start of tier 1, and it gets to tier 2, where you kind of would revisit tribal living. That's kind of where we're headed, to revisit tribal and ancestral living, but with a new worldly awareness, because these aren't worldly aware at this stage, are they? Because it's tribal.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of it. It's just like the world isn't black and white. It's grey, and just like with all of this, there's you carry elements of each stage with you, and you kind of need to embody elements of each stage with you, but just with that overriding awareness, which is ultimately where you want to get to. So just looking at this now. So then in modern society, you get examples of this, like with, like football hooligans and stuff like that. They identify with that like tribe that's around them. Yeah. So that would be like an example where
some shadow elements of purple coming through.
Yeah, in modern society, it's like an example of that. And then what happens is in a lot of these cases is people realize, oh, one sec, actually I can kind of take over this tribe. Like you always get someone that will sort of rise to the top and go, actually, if I take power here, I can do less and get more almost. And then that's when you appear into the next stage, which is red, which is egocentric, power for self, gratification, taking what you want without considering for others.
So you're going from purple, which is the collective, back towards the internal, the I. And you can notice how the colours go from purple kind of to a red, which is, this is the spiral kind of expanding now. Purple to red is not too far a transition. Go on. Yeah. So we're in red, which is Donald Trump, which is...
So it's really interesting. The first thing that sprung to my mind when I read this was, I read a book ages ago, and I can't remember the name of the author, but it's called Economic Hitman, or Tales of an Economic Hitman, something like that. And it was all about this consultancy firm effectively set up in America, which is like a branch of the government, but they weren't an official connection to the government. They were supposed to be a private company. And what they did was they went and consulted for third world countries. So I think they give an example in the book of Ecuador. So basically they approach Ecuador, they go, look, we can come into your country, we can assess all your natural resources, we can set up all the facilities to be able for you to mine those natural resources and sell them to the world. And with this newfound wealth you're going to be able to set up schools, hospitals, blah, blah, blah. And, we'll facilitate this whole thing happening. But what they're actually doing, and then they go, okay, in return for this, we want to set up, a company here in your, and basically what they're doing is they're pillaging the country, but in like a intelligent way. And they put like,
that's what America does to South America, basically. That's what it is.
Exactly.
They put who they want in power. They help. They do smear campaigns against the guy that won't, swing with them. And
and they actually talk about that in the book, the stages of taking over a country. So they first go in with this like pitch businessman, like, look what we can do for your country. Like it's going to be so amazing. We're going to set up these hospitals and all that. And then if that doesn't work, and there's instances where the leader of the country doesn't buy it effectively. And then I can't remember what the second stage was, but then the third stage was what they called jackals. It was effectively murdering the the person
who won't play ball with them.
Yeah, who's not playing ball.
Yeah.
And they give examples in the book of like, high flying politicians and people like that have just been, their plane, ran out of gas in the sky or whatever. It's just like, ludicrous stuff. So that was the first thing that sprung to mind when I read about Stage Red. And you think about
that's how people get power. You're saying they're just pure.
Well, it's people looking to generate power and wealth for themselves, disregard to the environment, disregard to other countries, the animals and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. It's just short-term gains. And if you think about the financial crash in 2008, where what's the film? The Big Short covers it, where there's the housing market crash in America.
Yeah, I've seen that film, man.
Sent everyone into a recession. Yeah. Well, there was a lot of people in the financial industries there just taking the piss, basically, where they would gathering as much money as they could for themselves, knowing that the bubble was going to burst at some point. So that's real sort of like red thinking, looking out for me, not looking out for others. And then what it says is that at the end of this stage, people realize that this is hurting people. You realize if you keep living this way, it's hurting people in general, and you end up often hurting the people around you. And it's interesting because Paul Chek sort of gives a summary of what he talks about, his sort of psychic development, where people go, I, we, all. And I know this oscillates between I and we, but that is that sort of, for me, is like a more simplified version where you start like taking consideration for, more people around you.
Yeah.
And then for me personally, like I'll go on to the next stage. So the next stage is blue.
Yeah. So we go from red, which is a hot colour, hot-headed, self-involved, swing all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum to a cold colour now. So this is kind of the widest gap in spiral dynamics. It's kind of spirals up, and then I think it kind of comes back a bit narrow at the top. So we're going from really opposite colours right now. It's opened out from purple to red to blue, which is back to the all, right? Back to the we.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So in the individual videos, they talk about the colours, or is that just something you've picked up on?
What the
how
temperature of the colour?
Yeah, the colours change.
Yeah, someone mentioned it, and I think it's so. That's why I like the model, because it's really visual as well.
Yeah,
and blue is kind of Labour Party, right? This is like, I just picture like Theresa May, or the UK. It's like, I'm sure you'll go into it, but it's the rules and the laws. It's like we all need to abide by these rules to protect the all.
Yeah, and it kind of, blue really reminded me of how a lot of people are looking at the current situation
in the UK, especially. But I guess around the world as well.
So it's blue is more like you said, we conformist rule. Looking out for the whole, your whole country, your whole town, or something, something like that. And it's very, one of the points they made about this, which I thought was interesting, is the world's very black and white. I'm right, you're wrong. And I think that's how a lot of people are viewing the mask situation at the moment. Like, I'm wearing a mask and I'm right, you're not wearing a mask, so you're wrong, or the opposite way around.
Yeah, we're wearing a mask.
Whereas, ultimately there are nuances within this, and there's a lot of information out there, and there's probably no one, if very few people, that understands every single angle of this argument and can take into the perspectives of, everyone that is choosing to or not choosing to wear a mask. So I think that's like an really important point to make, is like, you've got to understand that there's all these different perspectives in the world, and there's probably elements of right in a lot of these perspectives.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, and it's part of, we've all been in all of these stages at some point. It's made who we are, and we've probably all got shadow elements of each of these stages within us still, or resistance to elements that have been enforced on us, haven't we?
Yeah. And also, one of the interesting points with the blue was, he says that when people get to this level, they start to get disdain for people at other levels.
Yeah.
And this is up or down. So even if, this is quite interesting going into the next level, which is green, even if someone's technically
Orange,
above
isn't
you.
it?
Oh, sorry, orange.
Yeah.
Even if someone's above you, because you've got your viewpoint and you think the world's black and white and you're right and they're wrong, there's levels above you, which, because you don't understand, you just think you're wrong and you're more progressed than they are.
Above in terms of spiral dynamics, it doesn't make you above someone in.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, just to clarify, Anna. But yeah, so that's one thing I did notice as well. It's like you can have more conflict with those. Even though you're going to have more similarities with those closer to the dynamic that you're at. So say red and orange are either side of blue. Mm-hmm. You're going to have more contrast with them because you're on the other side of it, and you'll have more similarities with someone further away, but you still won't recognize them or understand them for their perspective. And as you get higher in the spiral, you're able to identify and understand each person's perspective because you recognize that you've been there. Yeah. Whereas at the earlier stages, it seems like red and blue, you're just so sure of your way. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you say, you can't see what's above you. You can't understand their perspective, and you just see them. Often you see them as backwards or behind you rather than like seeing the bigger picture that person probably sees or has been through. But you can't. This is what's interesting with the whole spiral dynamics thing. It just shows you how, I think it was Krishnamurti said, truth is a pathless land and nothing worth knowing can be taught. And it's like, you cannot just teach a blue person or a red person like green or yellow thinking. It just can't be taught. It has to be, their soul has to, that's why we talk about soul development, and the school of earth is here for soul development, is your soul has to have experienced it, has have to spend days, weeks, months with these dilemmas, like you said, going on from, was it purple to red? Like you identify that like this, or red to blue, that this way of living isn't serving me or the others. And it's like, that takes years of observation. And this goes to Socrates, know thyself ties into all of this, because the more you know yourself, the more you can recognize, kind of these stages, or you recognize how your choices are affecting you day to day. And then you just, it's accelerated development in your life and in your soul from that point. And then you can go through or you can identify your way through these levels. But yeah, so we're going from.
So it goes from red. So red to orange is the next one.
So again, this is the jump from red to blue is quite a big jump in colours, but red to orange isn't as far. So it's starting to close again now at the top. Yeah. And orange is a hotter colour again, similar to the red, but not quite as sharp as the red in the sense it's softer. So, but it's back to intrinsic again, internally focused. Yeah. And this is.
So it talks about
quite business
focus, science focus. So like the type of people that need a double-blind placebo study for everything. Big focus on technology, comfort, materialism. So like, how can we advance technology so we can make the world as comfortable as possible? And a lot of the time, and this is just my opinion on it, you get a lot of short-sightedness in this because. So the example,
the forest for the trees, like too busy in the magnifying glass.
Yeah, exactly. And the example that sprung to mind for me was AI. So you've got super intelligent scientists that are working around the clock to develop AI when we don't really understand how that's going to affect the world, and could have it's probably going to have huge and absolutely massive impact on the world. And we don't know in which way that's going to go. But yet a lot of the population sort of respect science so much and are at this level of consciousness. So they're just on board with, right, let's just develop AI and get it out there as soon as possible. Whereas for me personally, AI just doesn't sit right. Like I think I'm all for advances in technology.
It's a very orange way of thinking, like you say.
But we need to be cautious of this stuff.
Oh, completely. But I think that does speak to that's why you've got the politicians are red and blue, and then you've got the leading technology and mainstream, Elon Musk and all these guys. It's all very orange thinking, isn't it? It all is all at this tier where they're so focused and they're missing the kind of bigger picture. Yeah.
And another big point of this is big business. So people, again, it comes to that point of let's develop huge big businesses. Let's generate as much wealth as possible, and you're not really thinking, of the environmental impact of your business or anything like that.
I see something like Gymshark or someone like that, like Orange, because they are semi-conscious in a way. They are like kind of forward thinking with what they're doing, but is at the end of the day, it's just it's a clothing brand that's colossal and taking over, and they're very leading edge on terms of the mainstream, the way they use social media. Orange is kind of like like the fancy cars and the selfies in the mirror as well, isn't it? It's kind of like, and the gym bod or the summer body and all that stuff is like is tied in with this. And you said you recognize elements of yourself from your past life.
Oh, 100%, man. This is where, when I worked in finance, this is where I was.
Yeah.
Like, I was materialistic. I was trying to earn as much money as possible. I wanted to buy things. Yeah. And that's what I thought life was about.
And it's all okay. Like, that's what it was at that point.
Well,
until you learn.
And this is the thing is, right, okay, so it's psychic development. Like, you've got to go through these stages.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I was super lucky because I got into working in finance young, and I managed to sort of like progress pretty quickly. And I realized before long, okay, money doesn't equal happiness, and buying things isn't going to make me happy. So I was kind of lucky to almost progress through this stage at quite a young age and come out the other side and go, right, okay, well, money doesn't equal happiness. So how am I going to sort of generate happiness for myself? And then I went straight into the next stage. So I've got personal experience of really recognizing in my own life how you can develop from orange to green.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's the point that the bloke who does Actualised pointed out in the video, is that's what the point people get to. Is like they're hunting money and material things, and they realize, okay, actually there's much more to life than this.
Bring me happiness.
Yeah.
I've done it enough times, and some people can learn after one or two times, some people can learn after one or two lifetimes, like years of identifying more and more money. And I've seen a Mike Tyson video titled, the richest I was, like the least happy I ever was when I had the most money, kind of thing. And I think it ties into that. And he seems someone that's definitely had some soul development in the last decade or so beyond that. And then so from orange brings us to our next color. So we're going from internally focused back to externally focused.
Yeah.
We're going back to a cooler color again, which is green.
Yeah. So the next stage is green, and it's about caring and community. You almost come out the side and reject materialism.
Yeah. And that is one thing, you might have said already, but you kind of, as you go, because each side as you go from each side, internal to external, you do, and especially in the middle sections, you have a big rejection for the opposite side until you soften and recognize there's a place for that, and you don't judge it anymore. But I think in these earlier stages, you tend to judge the last stage, and like, I definitely think there's a big chapter in green where you just like hate materialism, and you judge the bodybuilder or whatever. And now I'm fully like embracing that kind of like, there's a beauty to all of that stuff, of honoring your body and knowing how it works. And there is a beauty in each stage. It truly is. Yeah. But yeah, green is more back to focus on the community. Yeah, and you completely reject that previous, what seemed very shallow orange. Yeah,
definitely. And then you go from almost trying to generate as much wealth for yourself as thinking, oh, actually, no, I don't need all this money, and it would be better if wealth was shared amongst people in the world. And actually, if you're running a business, for example, you might go, oh, well, it's not all about shareholder profit here. I actually think I want to invest money back into charity, or I want to
be more environmental with my product.
More environmental. I might lose a bit of profit because I want to use CO2 neutral delivery methods or stuff like that, to give a specific example.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because is it Leo who's the Actualised guy?
Gura, yeah.
So he pointed out that he thinks he's like sits in orange, or he's predominantly in the orange stage. And he says that it's like when he got triggered by this, he's like, oh, the hippies aren't above me, like thinking,
really?
Yeah. But it's an interesting point, because if you take this, you can, and if you accept it, and it might be like quite a hard pill to swallow, but once you swallowed that pill, then it's like your eyes are open to, okay, what's the next stage?
Yeah, the rejection of hippies as being lower than is definitely missing the forest for the trees, because it's kind of like you're scared of that. The intent, not saying that hippies are right in it, like necessarily, but their intention of love and understanding and compassion and less damage to the earth if you reject that, then you're just rejecting something in yourself that's connected to love, really, isn't it? It's like we all kind of know that's the better way to live, but whether we can do that and the undoing we have to do to get to that stage, or to have a chapter in that stage is tough.
You see it as well in the sporting community as well. You got a lot of people that won't do anything unless it's like scientifically proven. But I give this example all the time, and a big part of what we do is we go swimming in rivers, we go swimming in the sea, we get out in nature, we go walking in the woods. That stuff makes you feel better, without a doubt.
I don't need a double-blind study for it.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of people in that orange stage that would reject practices like that on the basis that, there's no scientific evidence for grounding.
The best athlete on earth isn't doing it yet or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for me personally, that is one of the game-changing principles, because especially if I'm working all day on the computer and then I drive over to the river at the end of the day and just dive in the river, that makes me feel so much better. And I can just switch off, and then my evening's chilled and I sleep better and everything. It just has massive ramifications.
Already been in the river today.
Yeah.
Yeah, after a climb.
That's the next stage, green. And then what's interesting about the development after this is he categorizes everything green and below as tier 1. Yeah. And then the next stage, which is stage 7, goes into tier 2, because there's like quite a drastic shift.
Yeah.
Because people in stages 7 and above develop this awareness an appreciation for all the lower stages.
Yeah.
So you can sort of see, you can see where people are at. And that's one of the most important things as well, is people find it really difficult to learn and evolve unless they're being taught from the stage at which they're at.
Within the stage, yeah.
Because they just, if you're trying to speak to them from it's kind of like a rung up the ladder, then it just doesn't compute.
Won't compute, yeah. So we're on to tier 2 now, essentially.
Tier 2, yeah. First stage of tier 2 is yellow.
Yeah.
So
this is, again, it's gone from red, orange on that side of the spectrum. You've got blue, green, and you've gone red, orange, and then we're at yellow. Yeah. But we're leaning on the hotter side where it's more internally focused again. Yeah. So people think when they get to like green and you kind of feel environmental and caring about the all, that's the end goal. But then no, there's a stage above that where you're back to the internally focused, right?
And just stopping on that, because I know you've mentioned before about your sort of journey in veganism and relating that to the green stage. And in my mind, that kind of fits quite well. A lot of people go into veganism with an amazing intention of not wanting to harm animals, harm the world. Yeah. But then you kind of come out. You see a lot of people come out the other side of that, and they have this still have a massive appreciation for animals and the environment. Maybe even, well, not even more so, but they still have that, but they focused on
just bigger perspective after that. But yeah, you've gone from realizing that was harming me.
Yeah.
Long term.
Yeah.
Caring about the whole actually ended up me costing my own health in a bit. So then I've had to go back or forward to focus on my own health. Yeah. To focus on that, to go back to internally focused, knowing that everything in is without anywhere, knowing that everything out is within. So there's no wrong stages of this. It's just kind of like the ebb and flow of this is such a beautiful pattern.
But you've taken that level of appreciation for animals and the environment that you gained within veganism, and you still carry that with you, and you're very conscious about
it to plants and everything as well, that they're living as well and they matter as well.
Yeah. 100%. But then you're ethically sourcing your meat and all this sort of stuff because you've got that appreciation. Yeah. So it's really interesting. So yellow is systemic thinking and appreciating that life is way more complicated than you may have thought at the previous stages. And that there's, effectively black and white thinking doesn't work because there's a million different perspectives on the planet and there's all these shades of gray. And there's the huge amount of people, because the majority of people are, according to Leo from Actualised, are in, the sort of the lower stages of development. He said the vast majority of the world's psyche are in the orange stage. So you having an appreciation for the fact that people are in that stage and the way they think and it doesn't, trigger you to such a great extent. So that's the note I made. There's elements of truth within each stage.
Absolutely, yeah. You put there. Blue people see yellow people as space cadets.
Yeah. So that's a problem with when, you know, people are in necessarily maybe a stage above your stage.
They can look loopy or out the...
Yeah. And that's the same, like we said before, with the all the people that are in that sort of like scientific mind, and they look at people that are employing, you know, the more sort of woo-woo hippie practices, and think, you know, that's a load of bollocks.
Yeah.
But...
Do you know what I heard? A really good JP Morgan quote today. Millionaires don't use astrology. Billionaires do.
Yeah.
And that is exactly that. It's like people that are like millionaires or that way of thinking think the stars don't affect anything. I don't need to make decisions. You know, what's astrology? Aries and what, you know, these star signs, they don't affect humans. But the billionaires, they make choices very differently. And I've always heard that about the Fertitta brothers, I think, as well. And that they make business decisions based on astrology, and they have advisors.
That's the owners of, well, the old owners of the UFC.
Yeah, who bought it for $2 million and sold it for $4 billion.
That's so interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, billionaires use astrology because they see the bigger picture and how everything's connected, and they recognize these kind of things. And whether they do it entirely consciously or they just know that it works, you know, and they hire someone else who does it. My mate Louis had a Yiddish reading, and they do this kind of stuff. So yeah, there are people who are specialists in this for business advisors. You know, at that kind of money tier, of course you're going to explore all things, and if it works, it works.
Yeah. And one of the other points about this stage that he mentioned in the video is that like people in this stage can become like very philosophical, looking at the world as this bigger picture and trying to kind of like work out the puzzles and how the systems fit and what would be a better system to, you know, to be able to run it. And then that philosophical style of thinking is also kind of the route or the buffer period to the next stage, because it can almost be like head in the clouds a little bit, because so caught up in this looking and deciphering this massive picture that is the world, but not actually going out into the world and taking any action. So then that leads us on to the next stage, to the people that have that major world view, but also are able to go out into the world and take action to improve the world. And the person that sprung to mind straight away was Paul Chek for me. So it just says able to take this holistic thinking and go out into the world and solve world problems with it.
That's one thing that I think the yellows, I think it was Leo that said it, they're always looking for the win-win-win. How can we all win? Well, that might have been turquoise. No, that was turquoise, actually. We'll get to that. But yellow, it was saying yellow's kind of more the hermit in the cave, you know, a lot of meditating, a lot of time alone, a lot of time, like speculating and evaluating internally. And that's yellow, quite taking themselves out of society, going, if I'm going to have an effect, I want it to be the right effect. So maybe just for now, I'm going to remove myself until I can really be certain of how I want to embed myself in reality, or maybe I don't want to embed myself in reality until we get to turquoise, which you then back to externally focused.
And it makes complete sense, because like if you're going to be a person that can effectively go out into the world with this holistic thinking and make an impact on a world scale, a positive impact, you need to have gone through all the other stages, because you need to have an understanding of how everyone's mind works. And you need to understand that the human psyche as a collective is all at different stages and everyone's developing at their own pace. And you need to take all that into consideration and go, right, okay, you know, for example, if you want to have the biggest impact on the world, you may need to go, right, okay, actually the human psyche as a whole is at orange. So I need to create something to help people evolve out of orange. So and then that might, if you're that far up the ladder,
that you can
that might seem so basic to, the information. And I remember Paul Chek talking about when he wrote his book, How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy, he said he rewrote it 10 times because he had his wife and his publisher reading it and they're going, Paul, it's too complicated. It's too complicated. You need to walk this down. You need to walk this down. And that's an example of that, where you're going out and you're going, right, actually, I want to help as many people as I can. So what level of information do I need to put out to meet people where they're at?
Yes.
And that's something that I struggle with personally. It's like I talk about nutrition and stuff from, just kind of my knowledge of it, but it goes over a lot of people's heads, and that's something that I'm always trying to learn, is how to communicate my information so people can understand it and they just don't switch off.
Yeah, or you meet them where they're at. You can identify
exactly
where they're at and how they're going to understand it. I think that's definitely part of being human and being like comprehensible coherent human, is being able to see meet someone where they're at. So we're on. We've not gone up yet.
So that was turquoise. So yellow, obviously going from the I sort of hermit, like you said, and then just being able to actualize all those philosophical flows.
So turquoise is back to world focused. Bringing your yellow, or your yellow meditated self, but then realizing actually it is important that I contribute, because maybe a lot of the people that are contributing aren't giving as much to solving this as they can give. So let's let my yellow ass become involved in the world and become a turquoise. And this is kind of like, Paul Check, like Wim Hof, I kind of see him as like, turquoise, offering something big that, like I said, a win-win-win for everyone. You can create a business that helps you, helps other people, and it helps the earth at the same time. Or, everyone benefits from the business or what you bring to the world. So that is someone like a Wim Hof, what he brings,
Yeah. And one of the points you made about this, which made me, it was really interesting for me, was he said unjudgmental. And you think about that, how many people in the world are unjudgmental?
Totally, yeah.
There's basically I don't think I've ever met someone. That was actually a question I asked during the satsang at the retreat I went to in the Himalayas. I asked the guy who's running the retreat, who was sort of a lifetime meditator, had lived at like an ashram his whole life, and he had told us stories about experiencing, and he was very we had to dig these stories out of him. He wasn't sitting in front of us telling us, but everyone's asking questions during the satsang, and he's saying about experiencing lower samadhi, where he connects with Christ consciousness and all this sort of stuff. And I asked him that, I was like, do you judge people? And he said, he sometimes he still will have thoughts where he'll like judge someone, in his mind. And it's like, as human beings, that feels so like intrinsically linked. Even if you're really good at keeping a cap on it and maybe not saying anything or being mean about people,
it still happens.
You still have those thoughts. So that was a really interesting point, because that just showed you sort of like how advanced spiritually you need to be to get to the point where you're completely unjudgmental.
Yeah. That's turquoise.
So he didn't cover anything higher than turquoise, but I know you've dug into this a little bit.
Yeah, I did dig into. I watched one thing about it. I don't want to go into it too much, but essentially there is one above turquoise, and they call it coral. And that is where what appears as chaos ensues, or recognizing that there is you cannot like nature appears chaotic. God, and so I think God, this is the realm where, not to bring God down to a level, I guess you can't, but it would appear as though he plays in this realm where chaos ensues, and it is the coronavirus is happening. Like if on the other side of this, everything clears, the clouds clear, and then we realize that it was all for the best. You know how many bad things happen in your life that turn out to be good things, or challenging times ended up building you? That is kind of coral. There is a way of people to evolve to a stage where they're at coral, and they can think and they can affect change or run businesses from this kind of coral thinking. Apparently, from one of the guy that I looked into talking about this, was saying that there are people that come into businesses with coral thinking, and he's kind of saying that it is chaotic, and you'll come in and you'll be brash. And in my head, I kind of not to say he's this way of thinking, but someone like Conor McGregor, who's chaotic, throwing dollies at trucks, but turns out it always seems to work out. He ends up getting bigger paydays and stuff like that. Not that it's still very orange in a way, but it's kind of like, within the chaos, good things are happening for some people.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard one to conceptualize that chaos, because I know we spoke about it before, the coral thinking, and someone brought up the what's the film? Thanos.
Yeah.
What's the film?
And I was saying
called?
Thanos is maybe a coral thinker.
Yeah, and then I dug into
Avengers.
Avengers, yeah, that film. So Thanos, if you haven't seen it, is this sort of like overlord character who's going around destroying areas of the universe, but he's doing it sort of from a perspective of greater good, right?
So just to quickly go into the plot, I'm not entirely sure of it, but basically all of humans are going to die out within a certain amount of years, or if half of them die now, the civilization lives on.
Yeah.
That's essentially what I got from the story.
Yeah.
So he's made the decision that, which people are really upset with, but in my head I'm like, he's for the greater good. Like half of people die now, but humans live on. Or you all die anyway in 100 years or whatever it is. And so in my head, I'm like, that's kind of coral thinking, where he's just kind of like making the decision for the greater good.
But it's so interesting. And this shows where I'm at on the level, because I can't conceptualize that.
Yeah.
I couldn't play that role where I was like, all right, okay, if I kill half the world, then the rest, the other half will survive, or everyone's gonna.
Yeah,
I couldn't. You couldn't step be the guy into those shoes.
No, you couldn't step into those shoes. But could you? Okay, let me put it this way: how about this then? If the world said, "Hey guys, we're either all gonna die, or half of us need to die now, and then we're all gonna carry on," could you put your hand up and volunteer to be part of the half that died now?
That's a big question.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Would you admire the people that made that choice?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
and
so then Thanos is appearing the bad guy, but making that choice easy for people.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to think I'd be someone that would, give that. When you think about your family around you and your.
Hey, I'm not here to really pose the question. I was just trying to make you think.
Yeah, well, it's like a tough question, and you need that level of psychic development, I guess, to be able to deal with these things.
But you're in a way, you're probably more important that you exist than Karen exists.
So yeah, and
sorry to Karen.
Yeah. It's so hard to dig into. And then, so I was speaking to Harry about this, and we were talking about through the Thanos example.
Which I don't even mean that, but that seems so harsh to even say that.
Just sort of.
Yeah.
And he said, and the point that I made was, I feel like someone who'd got to that level of psychic development would be so advanced spiritually that they'd be constantly in the present moment, or living the vast majority of their life in the present moment, and only stepping outside of the present moment to, plan or reflect. Because how the human mind works, where we're not always, but people are constantly always like looking into the future or looking into the past. And that's where a lot of human suffering comes from. And like Eckhart Tolle says, it's like there's no when you can truly sit in the present moment, there's no problem there.
Well, what's interesting, you say that, and I think Eckhart is probably quite like yellow to turquoise, I guess. Not to categorize everyone. The guy who did the talk, I think his name is R.A. Carano or M.A. Carano. So if you really want to dig deeper into coral, watch that interview, because if you're ready for it, it blew my mind. But he's done so deep into spiritual practices, and his spiritual practice is like parts of the Islam practice, parts of Christianity. He like throughout his day, he prays 5 times like they do in Islam, but he has praised like in different ways, different languages and stuff. Like his spiritual practice is the nutsest thing I've ever heard of. And but he said something about people believe spirituality too will be about living present moment, and he was just like, I think it was basically like there's no present moment. Like why are people put so much focus on being present, and it's like there is no, or like it just kind of disputed it in a certain way that was just interesting for me to hear. And then for you to say he'd be so present like that, this and like coral thinking is different, and it, like you said, it's hard for us to conceive what we can't really reach. But for me, I just thought that was kind of that way of thinking, and I even had this chat with Max the other day to bring it all back to Epstein.
yeah. It always ends up at Epstein.
But because everything, truth is stranger than fiction, right? Because what's that, Mark Twain quote? Truth is stranger than fiction, because fiction has to actually follow some kind of storyline for you to follow it, whereas the truth can just go anywhere, which is what's happening.
Yeah.
And you sent me a video, Head of the Snake, about Epstein, about Wexler, about how this goes deep into the Israelis' Secret Service having
allegedly,
right? But this is coming up more and more. The more I'm digging into this, they have Epstein and Maxwell, whose father was at Israeli Secret Service. They have so much video and data on people in power in American government and businesses, from Clinton, Musk, Elon Musk might be in there as well. All these people, you never know. The Israelis have all this data that they can just blackmail them. And I was like, what if Epstein ends up actually, he was like, and it's going to, some people might be offended, but those that are open, that don't judge, what if he's like a martyr? And not, obviously he acted out and he maybe got lost in the source of what he was doing, but his intention, he was the only man that could play the role to capture and make all these American governmental people feel comfortable in his environment, that they could do these acts that they were doing anyway, that they now have content for and can catch, so that this is actually, if this all gets unearthed and the people in power who are corrupt fall for their actions, in a way Epstein's like the catalyst and the hero figure that he may have signed up to be in the first place, that we have no idea that
it's so hard to wrap your head around that, because it's like, it's such an insidious act that you're like, there's no way, shape,
I'm
or
not
form.
In support of
yeah
course.
No, I know you're not.
But in a way, like I say, he maybe got lost in the source, but the intention, or like had to play that role, to capture, to get to bring to the surface what needs to be brought out. And we might be grateful for that, not that, but that, from what, in time to come.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is if all these, if everything gets cleaned up in the way it's looking like it might get cleaned up as a result of this, then that is going to be a great thing that happens as a result. And like you said, Paul Chek always quotes this, that consciousness is a psychic substance produced not blindly, but in the living awareness of opposites. Yeah. And you talked earlier and said that, there's always darkness within the light, and there's always light within the dark. Just look at the yin yang symbol.
Yang symbol, that's what it is. Yeah.
And this everything that's gone on with Epstein is horrifically dark. Is absolutely horrifically dark. But
it's happening more secretly before.
Well, some light may come out of it now, in terms completely. Of all these, the child sex trafficking rings and et cetera, which seem to be being unearthed as a result of this, may all be stopped, or hopefully they're all stopped. Which the
royal family might be brought down from it, man.
It's such that the more I dig into it, there's so many different directions you can go in terms of this, and it's an absolute minefield. But I implore anyone to research into it more. There's so much information out there.
There's a guy I'm watching at the moment, Sean Atwood, who released a documentary like 2 months ago called In the Shadows, or In Our Shadows, and it's all about the paedophilia in the government, in the UK government. Yeah, I've watched it. Have you watched that one? Yeah. You watched that one, yeah.
Out of Shadows.
Yeah. So I was just watching that now, and it's just the interviews with the police officers who investigated the child sex rings and were finding stuff, and were just told from people above, this is a bit above your pay grade, like you need to start back, and then got moved into different jobs and things like that. Mm-hmm. When all this stuff was clearly going on with, the former prime minister, one of the guys, Edwards, something, I wasn't around at the time, but one of the former prime ministers, and there's a guy saying he was on his boat being buggered by him when he was like a teenager or whatever, like as a boy, and it's like, and he didn't even speak bad of him. He was like, he treated me all right. He gave me a fag at the end of it. Like, it's insane to hear these stories, but this is in the UK, and you got photos of this guy with Savile, and then I heard stories of Boris Johnson and his lot, and how they, part of their, like, the UK version of Skull and Crossbones, I've got the name of it, it begins with a B, but they like go up to homeless people with £50 notes, and then they just take a lighter to it right in front of the homeless people, and that's part of like their they just really drive in and enforce the divide between classes that they and it's just, I'm just glad that that I watched that, like I said, I'm watching that Sean Atwood thing, out of the shadow, what was it called?
Out of shadows.
and it's got 500,000 views.
Yeah.
You know, and people are really starting to take to this, and there's so much more we can go into. But the internet, that's why I imagine that YouTube's doing this land grab to control all of the fake news stuff that isn't fake news. They're trying to control it now because it actually is starting to get out of hand, I think.
And that should be a massive red flag for a lot of people. If you just look at the censorship that's going on at the moment, the videos are just getting taken down. Like, people should be allowed to have different perspectives and different ways of thinking. And looking back at the model we've just discussed,
You can't have it on their platform if they're the paedophile. If it's owned by pedophiles.
but that's what I mean. It shows that they're
It
like
does.
how low down the model they are, because
does.
they're not willing to allow all these perspectives to come, come to light. Yeah.
Cool. That's I think that's as far as we get with spiral dynamics for now. Anyone can go in and research it much further. There's a book on it.
Yeah.
It does kind of it's kind of a broader perspective of, is it Maslow's hierarchy, or Maslow, the pyramid of like shelter, food, love. It kind of, that's kind of a simpler
It's a much more complicated version.
It goes
of that, I guess.
a bit more depth. But if you want to kind of delve deeper, you go. There's a book, you can buy it from the internet, or I'm sure. And then there's Leo Gura's videos on actualised.org, and also Ray Maor doing his perspectives. I think there's a video on green coming out very soon from him. So yeah, you can dig deeper into spiral dynamics. But I just thought that was a really interesting thing that I shared with Josh that you seem to find interesting as well.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And as a starting point, that Actualised video, he does an hour and a half where he just covers the stages 1 through 8 over about, I think he actually wraps it up around the 1 hour 15 mark. So that's where all my notes are from for today.
Yeah,
and it's a really good starting point, because it just gives you an overview of everything, apart from he doesn't mention coral.
Yeah, and it depends how deep you want to. Like, if you have an idea for sort of where you feel you're at, just watch the video on that and to see how much resonates. That's what I kind of did, and I watched a few around that. Yeah, how's gym going?
Yeah, it's going good, man.
Sessions,
First week, 2 weeks back in the gym now.
Yeah.
And I'm doing Strong Fits program. If anyone's interested in doing that, it's like a strong man with some sort of more bodybuilding movements. But he talks a lot about the internal, external torque stuff that me and Tim have been sort of incorporating in some of our training videos. Yeah. It's an amazing program. It's good for me because I've always done powerlifting.
Yeah, so you're doing more sandbag stuff, innit?
Sandbag stuff, lots of strongman bits and pieces, like sled pulls and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I didn't want to kill myself. So this first 5 sessions back in, which I took over 2 weeks, I just took it easy, got the whole session done, but kept the weight light, and just thought, first week back in the gym, I don't want to injure myself or, smash my neuromuscular system. Yeah. I
wanted to come today to the session, but I'd already planned me and Lewis went rock climbing or bouldering.
Yeah.
It's my second week in a row. I don't think I've been this year. So literally my forearms were fatigued for about 6 days, just about recovered, and I went today, had a good session, and then a swim in the river. But yeah, so I'm enjoying the climbing. It's such a nice full body, like calisthenic-y kind of exercise from the tips of your toes to the tips of your fingers. So adding that in, I had a nice 10K run yesterday, Breen down, swam in the ocean there. That was nice. So yeah, back up to running and climbing. We're going to train Friday, right? Yeah. I'll join you in the gym on Friday.
But I did a 5K yesterday as well.
Did you do it yesterday?
I did the 5K nose breathing only the whole way.
The whole way, you made it this time. We did the 400 meter session on Sunday. We found an abandoned running track hidden 5 minutes from my house. It's incredible. And the video will be up by the time you're watching this. It should be up on the channel already. Tomorrow, as we're recording it, Wednesday. Pete just sent me the video, so that should be up. Cool. You've got an exciting announcement for APE Nutrition?
Yeah, we got 2 new products out this week, or Monday at the very latest. We got an organic lion's mane and cordyceps mushroom, and I've gone to town sourcing these. So
you have.
A lot of the companies out there sort of produce products that are 1-to-1 ratios, grown on oats, and I'll go into it all in a separate video. I'm gonna put out some educational stuff. Yeah. But I've just gone sourced really high quality mushrooms. We're using the fruit in bodies, which has got real high percentage of all the beneficial properties. Had all the lab reports, so I know the levels of beta glucan. So they're coming out end of this week, next week, and I've been trialing them myself, and they're just awesome products. I'm really excited about it.
Awesome, man. That's dope. I've also got a new product on my site, Mr. Weck. We've got some Weck Method pulsers here. I've got the old school ones, which I got when I was out there. And then we've got the new ones. These are actually what I've got on the site. You play with them a bit, haven't we? Running.
Yeah, they're great. Like we've only done 1 or 2 sessions with sessions with these, I think, but they improved my running immediately.
You felt it. Yeah.
Well, just that concept, because I've never had any running training. Obviously, you've trained running quite a lot, and just that concept of the like double down that the Pulsar teaches you has improved my running drastically.
Which I've seen McGregor do recently as well in a video. But yeah, essentially, it's a coordination tool. That's what David Weck's about. These simple, clever coordination tools that helps you sync the drive of the arms with the pump with the drive of the legs. Essentially, so you're pulsing down with the upper body, with the sound of that, so they're both in sync, so they're not out of sync. And sorry if that's really loud. And then you onto the leg, and then you drive, and then from each leg. But they've got tutorials on their YouTube and on the website. There's plenty of videos of Mr. Weck and Savage Protocols doing pulse techniques. But basically, I'm the first UK, as far as I'm aware, the only UK distributor, European distributor, because the shipping from America is like $70. If you're in America, and you want them, go to Weck. But if you're in the UK or Europe and you want some pulsers, on humantimothy.co.uk, I've not created a whole new section, but they're under if you click on ropes, then you'll see the pulsers there.
Nice. I saw a video of Dominic Cruz using them as well.
Dominic Cruz using them, yeah. I've seen, and we met a guy at the track.
Yeah.
And he had a 200-meter runner that ran the sub 21.
Yeah.
He got a PB from training with the pulsers, and that was random, wasn't it? Yeah. He's like he said to me, "Oh, you're the only other guy in the UK with pulsers, and you're on the abandoned track at the same time as me."
It's madness.
Crazy small world. But Connell, he's a cool guy.
Yeah, he's really cool. But that's the thing with him. It's like, if you haven't, because he was a running coach, and and when you've got people that are in that running world, but for someone like me that's never been trained to run, it's like your personal, at home running coach that you pay for once, and that's it. You can take them out with you whenever and improve your technique.
Yeah, that's such a fun tool. We've not even explored them massively, but every time we do, we enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, guys. Well, thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more content. APE Nutrition.
Yeah, so my website's apenutrition.co.uk, on Instagram ape_nutrition, and I've got a discount code on for the listeners of the podcast. It's rediscovering human at checkout.
And humantimothy.co.uk for ropes, rope courses. Mindful Warrior course is up there, the pulsers, and the discount code is rediscover, all caps lock, on Instagram at humantimothy. I think they already know all this stuff, but it's kind of like we feel obligated to do it. But thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate all the support and the views that this content gets, and we'll keep bringing you more. Peace.
Cheers, guys.